Going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops. Today we're doing the small forward tier. By now, I'm doing this all on the same day, so I don't have to say the shirt store anymore. So let's just get into it. So for tier 1, we got actually 3 people, which I know might sound ridiculous, might sound absurd, but hear me out, because it's just hard. I feel like these top 3 need to be separated from tier 2 players, but I'm not going to say that everyone on tier 1 is on the same level, because I think that's pretty obvious. So here you go, here's tier 1. First off, we got LeBron, who I think is the best small forward of all time. Next, we got Larry Bird, who you could argue is kind of like in the same realm of LeBron, but you could also argue he's not. But lastly, which is going to stir a lot of controversy, is Kevin Durant. But the thing is, Kevin Durant is probably one of the most unstoppable players offensively of all time. And in years recent, he's become a pretty good defender. So I'm going to have to put him tier 1, but I wouldn't say that he's better than LeBron. You can make an argument for Larry Bird being better than LeBron, but I don't think so. So yeah, that's my tier 1 crew. Moving on to tier 2, we got multiple people. First off, we got Dr. J, Julius Erving. He won an MVP in the NBA and the ABA, I believe, but here we are, we're just talking about the NBA. He won a championship with the Sixers, and probably one of the most athletic players of all time as well. Next, we got John Havlicek, who was on that 70s Celtics dynasty and really the 60s and the later part of Bill Russell's time, but he was also with guys like Dave Cowens and JoJo White. Won Finals MVP as well. Next up, we got Elgin Baylor, who is the 3rd highest point per game scorer of all time. It's a shame he never really won a championship, but he was just a straight up scorer. Next up, we got Scottie Pippen, 6 for 6 in the finals, just like MJ, because he played with MJ. He's probably one of the better defenders of all time as well. We've seen that he could average about 20 points per game too in his better years. Next up, we have Rick Barry. Rick Barry was also a crazy scorer. Really, a lot of these guys in this tier, and actually the next tier, are mainly known for being amazing scorers. But Rick Barry was definitely that. He averaged over 35 points per game one year, and led his team to a title as well in 1975. So that's pretty amazing for him. And lastly, we got Dominique Wilkins, who, just like Pete Maravich, I said in the last video, I think Dominique Wilkins is probably one of the more underrated players of all time, because dude was just a straight up scorer. He led the league in scoring, actually. He was a pretty good rebounder, pretty solid defender, very athletic, but it's just a shame they didn't really have any teammates around him. I think some of the best teammates he had around him when he was with Atlanta was, Doc Rivers and Kevin Willis, who were both one-time All-Stars in the 13 years that he was there, so that's kind of unfortunate for him. Moving on to tier 3, here's where we get a lot of the scorers. I'm actually going to name these 4 in a row that are crazy scorers: Alex English, Paul Pierce, Carmelo Anthony, and Bernard King. So I got Alex English first. I think Alex English is probably the best scorer of all these, which might sound crazy because Melo is on this list and Bernard King was also a crazy scorer. But I think, honestly, Alex English might be the best scorer on this list. And keep in mind, this is my list, not yours. So roast me in the comments if you don't agree, or praise me in the comments if you do agree. I'll be expecting a lot of roast. But also Alex English is a pretty good defender, and he was on pretty good Nuggets teams in the 70s and some of the 80s. Next up, we got Paul Pierce. Obviously, I got him above Melo and Bernard King because he was a Finals MVP, won a championship, led his team to the conference finals multiple times in the early 2000s as well. Next, we got Melo, probably one of the better offensive players of all time. Back like when he was with the Nuggets and even the Knicks, he brought the Knicks like probably their best playoff run of the whole millennium in 2013. So he kind of like brought some life back to like that franchise for a little bit. And then next we got Bernard King. I know Bernard King, he didn't really have too many memorable postseason runs. He didn't really get far in the postseason, but he was also a pretty good scorer. And I got him at the 4th spot on tier 3, which I believe that's where I had Pete Maravich last time as well, and he was kind of a similar situation. Next we got James Worthy, who was on the Lakers dynasty in the 80s and 90s, a Finals MVP as well, and he was obviously a really good defender as well. And the last player on tier 3 is Kawhi Leonard, who, when it's all said and done, will probably end up tier 2. He's already a champion and a Finals MVP. He's also leading the Raptors to their first ever Finals ever. And he's also a multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year too. So with all that, I say Kawhi Leonard is tier 3. Moving on to tier 4, we got Grant Hill to start it off, who was crazy athletic, but unfortunately for injuries, he couldn't keep it up like much longer. Adrian Dantley, who was another crazy scorer, similar to the 4 I mentioned in tier 3, but he didn't really have too much success when he was with the Jazz. It wasn't until they got like Malone and Stockton that they started like actually building a serious team. Then we got Bob Dandridge, who won titles with multiple franchises with the Bucks and the Bullets in the 70s. And he was a really good defender as well. Now we got Paul George, he's had two kind of sides of him. It's kind of been weird. Like, he started off, obviously, wasn't much of anything, just like another draft player or whatever. Then when Danny Granger got hurt with the Pacers, he really stepped up and he was like super hyped up. Then after he got hurt, he kind of like, the hype kind of died. And then now I feel like this year, like with the Thunder, he's kind of like bringing it back a little bit, and he also could win Defensive Player of the Year this year. So I got Paul George tier 4. Could be higher, obviously, just like anybody else that's still playing. Chris Mullin, I also got tier 4. He didn't really have too many memorable postseason runs either, and he wasn't quite the scorer as like Bernard King, so I got him tier 4. And lastly, tier 4, I got Giannis Antetokounmpo, Greek Freak. When it's all said and done, he's definitely going to be tier 3. But right now, I just got him tier 4 because he's kind of just getting started. He hadn't gotten past the first round until this year, really. But I think in a few more years, he'll see himself at a higher tier. Moving on to tier 5, we got Mark Aguirre, who was mainly known for being with the Mavericks, but was also with the Pistons during like part of their championship runs. And then we got Peja Stojakovic, who was a multiple-time All-Star with the Kings, a Kings team that probably could have won the championship, or even should have won the championship if you want to say that. But he did win one with the Mavericks in 2011. Next, we got Paul Risen. There's not really much to say about him. He played in like the 50s with the Warriors, but he was scoring champion multiple times, and also I believe won a championship or so, maybe 1 or 2 championships or so. But regardless, like, he had crazy numbers, so when you put up those kind of numbers, like, you gotta at least be on the list. Next up, we got Andre Iguodala, who kind of is similar to a guy like Manu Ginobili in the sense that he doesn't have too many personal accolades, but he's still been pretty solid. Obviously, he was an all-star back with the Sixers. He led the Nuggets to a 57-win season the one year he was there. In his prime, he could get you like 25-5, which is kind of similar to what Ginobili could do in his best statistical year. And then now he's pretty key to a Warriors dynasty. And actually, as I'm recording this, just the other day was game 2, where obviously he had so many injuries, and he still came up big and hit that big 3, which kind of sealed the deal. So he's always been a pretty clutch player as well. Next, we got Billy Cunningham, who was on the Sixers in the 60s, won some titles there, but and he was also, just like Paul Rison, kind of similar, crazy numbers, but yeah, so I got him on tier 5. And lastly, we got Glenn Rice. Glenn Rice was kind of on some iffy teams. He was on the Hornets when they were not too much of anything. He was on the Heat after the time of Alonzo Mourning, I believe, and Tim Hardaway Jr. After they had kind of already gotten to the conference finals and stuff. So yeah, that's why I got him tier 5, and that's what I got for my small forward tier list. So again, be sure to voice your opinion in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you thought this video was enjoyable, and I'm out. Peace.